As I was reflecting on it, I think the main theme or main issue that comes up in that third chapter is humility. Humility. And I actually think humility could work as a good general description for the whole book of Ruth. We can learn so much from Ruth, from Naomi, from Boaz about humility and what it looks like in our actions. Now, before we get into it, I got to pause because I recognize the irony of preaching about humility. Who am I, right? To tell you about humility. Because I honestly think the moment I tell you I'm humble, I'm lying. I believe that. So, we're going to get right into it today. Don't learn from me. Learn from Ruth, learn from Boaz, learn from God on what humility looks like. So let's get right into it with the first few verses this morning, Ruth 3, 1-5. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here's our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." So I want you to notice here that Naomi is the one who ramps up the plan. Right, because Ruth has been gleaning every day, right, for weeks, going out to the field, collecting food. Naomi says, "I want more for you. I want you to be a little bit more secure." And this word here for security is manach, and it means resting place. So what she's saying to Ruth is, I want you to have a place to rest. You're working so hard, right, my daughter-in-law. I want security for you. And note she says for you. Naomi doesn't say, do this for me. She says, I want a resting place for you, Ruth. So even Naomi, we can learn right off the bat the humility in wanting that support for Ruth. And she says, to get that, I want you to put on your best clothes. That's how most Bibles translate this. And I want you to go here. All right? This is an illustration of what the threshing floor might have looked like. So what happens on the threshing floor? This is where they take wheat or barley and they separate it from the chaff. This was done a number of ways. If it was outside, they would usually throw it up. If it was inside, they would often beat it to separate those two things, which means there's dust everywhere. All right? For people like me with allergies, this is a nightmare. Right? And what does Naomi say to Ruth? I want you to put on your best clothes. That's how it's normally translated. You're going to get all decked out to go here. Why? Because Boaz is there. I want you to know what he tells her to put on. This word here for what he says I want you to put on is simila, and it means a mantle or a wrapper. So picture a coat, kind of a loose-fitting coat, maybe with or without arms, just to wrap yourself up, to cover yourself up. She's not saying put on your best dress, okay? What she's saying is make sure you're covered and protected for you to go into the threshing floor. Now, the other thing you got to know about this wrapping, this simila, is it's used also as like a blanket. If they were wearing this at night, and this is probably actually what Boaz did, and you're out and you're to sleep where you were, because he's sleeping where he was working, right? You would take your simila, your cloak, and you just pull it up over you like a blanket. So it actually has two purposes. It has like a coat, and it's a blanket, which as I was thinking about this, all I could picture was this. Do you guys, anyone else have a Snuggie? There's two of us in the room. Three of us, awesome. 4 of us, Snuggie wears. I had a good buddy in seminary with a great sense of humor, and so I have an extra large one of these beauties at home that I don't eat large banana splits on. But this does give you a little bit of a better picture, I think, of what she's going to wear. It's not her finest clothing. It's that he wants her to be wrapped and covered and protected for when she goes in. And this is because she's telling her that the timing for how this is going down is very important. Timing is key. And I hear people say all the time, timing's everything. Timing is everything. Let me tell you something. If you go in at the right time and say the wrong thing, timing's not everything, but it's close. Timing is very, very, very important. And Naomi says, I want you to go in, right? I want you to wait till after he eats and drinks. Amen, right? It's just a great plan in general. You want to drop something on someone? Like wait until after they've had something to eat, something to drink, and then tell them. But she doesn't even say tell them then. Then I want you to watch him, see what he does, and go lay at his feet. I mean, if I'm Ruth, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how long do I have to wait? I'd want to walk in and be like, hey, Boaz, I'm Ruth, you're Boaz. What do you think? No. Go in, watch, wait. The timing of this is very, very important. And Ruth complies completely with the plan. Where she lies, what she's doing is she's told to go in and lie and wait. Lie at his feet and wait. This was a sign of incredible respect, and I want to make sure you guys see that. Where she lies is probably crosswise at his feet. This is an image of what it might have looked like. So picture you've got Boaz sleeping here, and says, Ruth, I want you to lay like this, perpendicular to him, not parallel, because that would be inappropriate. Lay like this, which is, by the way, where servants lay. So in this type of situation, they're working, right? On the threshing floor, you get tired, you just go to sleep on the ground. Your servants would sleep like this, at their Lord, their master, the person they're working for, at their feet. That's where she lie. Now, when I think about this position, I also can't stop but picture the cross, which I do not think is a coincidence at all. And we have got to do this with God. Lie, wait, at his feet. She says, Ruth, he'll tell you what to do. Do we do that with God? Or do we just storm the bar and say, God, this is what I want you to do, and this is when I want you to do it, right now? Sometimes you got to go in, pray, wait, lie at his feet, wait. Do exactly what he tells you to do when he tells you to do it. We need to lay at the foot of the Lord, just like she did with Boaz. It's a beautiful picture. Now, you need to understand, though, how risky this was for Ruth. What she was doing was incredibly risky. Remember, she's still technically married. Her husband had passed away. But the law of the time said that she's still technically married. And she goes and lays at the feet of another man on his property, presumably in the dark, which means that, yes, she could have been taken advantage of. Not saying that Boaz would have done that, right? We know he had greater character than that, but Ruth doesn't know that. She just goes into this man's property and lays at his feet. This could have gone terribly wrong. Or what if, try to picture this for a second. What if Boaz wakes up and sees her at his feet and is like, what are you doing here? Get out. She could have been rejected. This whole thing could have gone totally wrong. But that didn't stop Ruth at all. She followed the instructions completely. So let's see what happens next, verses 6 through 9. So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and there lying at his feet was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." Note that she sticks with the plan perfectly. Humility follows instructions. Note that you're never told in here what Ruth felt about the plan. We don't have anything from Ruth saying, Naomi, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. Ruth could have thought this was the worst plan in the world, but she did it. Humility follows instructions. Sometimes God tells us to do things that we might not think are a great idea, or we might find to be uncomfortable. We got to do it anyway. Humility follows instructions, which is exactly what Ruth did, and she followed them to a T. Every single thing. And note that those instructions said, do what he tells you to do. So she was following Naomi's instructions and Boaz's instructions. That's what humility does. Everything that God tells us to do, if we are in a situation, someone tells us to do something, and it is an appropriate thing to do, it is a biblical thing to do, we've got to stick with the plan. not cut corners because we think that's a better thing to do. She followed instructions perfectly. Now, why those instructions? I can't tell you. I have always wondered about Naomi's plan. Why surprise him like this? Right? I mean, this is a really crazy plan. I would have probably said, Ruth, just go in, introduce yourself, let him know who you are, what his role to you is, and say, hey, what do you think? You want to try this out? But that's not what she said to do. She has this whole thing laid out about watching him, waiting him, doing what he tells you to do, laying at his feet. This is on my list of things I want to ask God why when I see him. Dinosaurs and why Ruth went in and surprised Boaz. Okay? I don't know exactly why they came up with this plan. I know it worked perfectly. And so what I can kind of guess from this is that sometimes it's better to be introduced by our actions than by our words. Imagine Boaz waking up with her at his feet. Once he kind of shakes his head, right, clears the cobwebs, because it's like the middle of the night. Who likes to wake up in the middle of the night anyway? And he sees this woman at his feet, and she introduces herself. And he thinks, wow, you've just been laying here at my feet waiting on me? Of course, if he's a good man, which we know he is, he reacted in that way. Not being shocked and kicking her out, but being surprised at her humility, at her servanthood, at her submission to him. It's a beautiful way to be introduced rather than anything that Ruth could have said. Then she's told to uncover his feet. Did you guys notice that part? Go and uncover his feet. And I've always wondered why she did that. I think there's something of humility in that action of uncovering even his feet. Some people think that she did this to wake him up. I don't know about that because we're not told she uncovered his feet and Boaz was like, hey, I'm up. So I don't know exactly why this was done, but my favorite theory on this is that this was done to help Boaz understand that Ruth was uncovered. Ruth was uncovered, unprotected, right? She's the one who has to go out every day and glean for food that Boaz already had. I think this is actually to generate a little bit of empathy in Boaz. He wakes up, because who likes to wake up, right? Like if you're married, right, you go to sleep and everyone's covered up on their feet, and you wake up in the middle of the night, 1 a.m, and someone's pulled the covers off of your feet. No one likes that, right? Then you get that tugging match and you pull the covers back. No one likes to wake up like that. So why do that to Boaz? I think there was a little bit of making him understand, I need covering and protection just like you do, Boaz. And he felt it when he woke up. And what's the deal with God and feet? Have you guys ever thought about this? God's got a thing with feet. He really does. Ruth, lay at his feet. We're told over and over again what to do with our anxieties. Put it at his feet. Not at his head, not in his hands. Put it at his feet, which is where anxiety belongs, all the way down there. Jesus washed what? Feet. Could have washed hands. That was a big thing back then. Washing hands, making sure you're clean. No, he washed feet. He went even lower than that. It's this thing with God and feet. You know those things down there that we just kind of cover up and basically like it's the least thing that we clean on our body? Feet. God's got a thing with feet. There's something humble about that. I think it's to remind us we're down here at his feet. He is up there. And Ruth does that when she goes into Boaz, says, I'm down here, you're up there, Boaz. And then she says something totally consistent with that. I'm your servant. She tells him, I am your servant. And I want us to reflect on this because I think as Christians, we need to not be ashamed of saying we are servants. Because note what Ruth did. She's a voluntary servant. It's not slavery as we think about it now. This was a voluntary decision to serve another human being. That's a good thing. Right? We as Christians make a voluntary decision to serve God. We make a voluntary decision to serve each other. It's okay to go say, yes, we are servants. We're servants of God. We're servants of other people. It's actually a beautiful illustration of our humility and what we believe in. And then she says to him, I want you to put your cloak over me. Spread your cloak over your servant. I want you to understand that cloak. I actually looked this up. It's not the simila that she says to cover over me. She says, spread your kanaf over me. You guys remember that word from last time? It means wing or extremity. Remember Boaz says to Ruth, you've put yourself under God's wing. So how cool is it she now lays at his feet and uses the same word for him? As if to say, Boaz, remember you said you want me under God's wing? God wants me under your wing, under your covering. And don't miss this. This is a euphemism for marriage. This is a female marriage proposal. Isn't that awesome? There really is something intimate in a really good way about what she's saying to him. I need you to cover me. I need you to hold me, to put your arms around me, and to protect me. Beautiful image for marriage and how we should look out for each other in relationship. Verses 10 and 11, his response, he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You've not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman." Note how he's evaluating this woman. This thing you did most recently is even better than the first thing. Guys, we're evaluated by our repeated action, not just what we do first, by the last thing we did for people, right? Make a big deal out of the first impression. And I get it. First impression's important. You want to make a good first impression. But when you're in a relationship with someone, you're not known for your first impression. You're known for your last one. What's the last thing you did? What's the last thing you said? Far more important than your first impression. And Ruth just keeps getting better. Boaz says, this thing you've done now, man, I thought you were loyal and strong before. This is incredible. For you and I, we are to be evaluated by God and other people for what we did last, most recently, not what we did first. And this should be convicting for us. Should cause us to think maybe about that one thing we did to so-and-so that probably wasn't so great, that they remember you because of. So we should probably go clear that one up. Apologize, right? Give them a new last impression of us. Ruth gives Boaz a repeated great impression of her sacrifice and her humility and her commitment to him. And in response to a woman laying at his feet, don't miss the irony of this, he says, you're a woman of strength. He says to her, you're a worthy woman. This word for worthy is chayil, and it means strength. It can mean efficiency. It can actually mean wealth or army. He says to her, this woman who's laid at his feet, a position of submission, he says, you are strong. Ruth, in all of her humility, is a strong, strong woman. This is the exact same word, by the way, that's used to describe Boaz. Earlier when Boaz was described as a man of wealth, right, you should go to him. It's the same word, chayil. So here's the man who's strong, right? Boaz even means strong, who's described as strong, and he now says to this woman, you are strong. Other thing you got to know, this is the first time in the Bible this word is used to describe a woman. This is a beautiful picture, a beautiful image of the humility and strength of a woman. And we get all of that from this one scene and from Ruth. Let's keep reading verses 12 and 13. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there's another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin for you, good, let him do it. If he's not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning. Try to put yourself in Ruth's shoes. She's really probably hoping he's going to say, oh, sweet, you're next of kin, I'll take you in. But that's not what he says. He says, actually, there's someone who's closer in relation than me. Humility stands up for the truth. Boaz could have taken advantage of this whole situation. You're laying in my house, in my property, at my feet. Sure, you're mine. But he didn't, because that wasn't the situation. You see, Ruth thought he was the closest in relation. Now, just so you guys understand how this works, right? The system was set up so if a spouse lost her husband, a wife lost her husband, that traditionally it would be the brother of that husband that would be married to the wife to keep the family line going. Now, most people are pretty confident that Boaz and these others weren't brothers, because if they were brothers, they would have been described as her brother. So I don't know what they are, cousins, right? Like second cousins, third cousins. Ruth thinks that this guy is like the first cousin, right? Boaz is going to be the first in line to take me in and marry me. And he could have said, yeah, you're right, I am. But he didn't. He said, no. In other words, I'm a second cousin or a third cousin. There's someone closer who actually has the right to marry you. Humility doesn't take advantage of a situation, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires a little more work for Boaz. Basic illustration for us today. When you guys go out to eat, you get a bill. How many of you read that bill to make sure you're not overcharged? Okay, hopefully the rest of you are doing it anyway, right? Because you get the bill and people make mistakes, right? We're all human, and sometimes you're going to get overcharged. Now, how many of you read it to make sure you're not undercharged? Very good. I can tell you 2 to 3 times a year, I find on a bill I get at a restaurant, there's something missing that I actually had. And I love the look on the waiter's face when you call them over and say, hey, I owe you more. It's an awesome look. And if you've done this, you know what this looks like. They're shocked that you didn't want to get anything from them. You called them over because you want to pay them more. And I will tell you, half the time I've done this, they will literally laugh at you and say, no, it's on us. We forgot to put it on the bill. And I'll say, no, I'm serious. Charge me. Because I ate it. I consumed it. It's true. It's right. Humility doesn't take advantage, even when it's convenient, to skirt around it. Boaz says, no. There's someone else closer in relation to you, and we're going to run it by him first. This is stuff we can live out every day in our lives. But the other reason I want you to note that Boaz isn't the closest is because it makes it clear how Boaz feels about Ruth. Boaz chose Ruth. He didn't care for her out of obligation, right? He wasn't the automatic next in line. And he actually uses a really interesting word here. I want to make sure you guys understand. When he says, if he, so he's referring to the closer relative, right? If he is not willing to act as next of kin. This word willing to me, it sounds like he's being pulled into it. You know, like he's being forced into the position. That's not this word. This word here is chafetz. Chafetz, and it's a really awkward word to mean a really beautiful thing. Delight. What Boaz is saying to Ruth is, if he is not delighted in you, he should be thrilled. He should be excited to have you, Ruth. In other words, hey, Ruth, I delight in you. It's a beautiful thing. This isn't a forced thing. And that word delight, right? We're told early on in the Bible, God delights in us. God delights in you. Numbers 14:8. He delights in you. And I had heard that. I don't think you can make it out of Sunday school or anywhere near a church and not hear that. God delights in you. What does that mean, right? Delight. There's like, and there's love. Where's delight? And I will tell you, I never understood what delight was until I met my wife. And I say this to young people that are trying to figure out, how do I know if he or she's the one? And I will say, do you delight in them? Delight. And what I mean by that is, do you just generally love all that they are? Do you take extreme delight in who they are as a person? The way they talk, the way they move. I think about myself and all my weirdness and oddness and idiosyncrasies. Do you love the way I stumble over certain words? Do you love the way that I make mistakes almost every time when I do a certain thing? Delight. That's how God feels about you. He loves you even when you do those quirky little things. That's how God feels about you. That's how Boaz feels about Ruth. And so he says to her, if he, that next of kin, isn't willing to be delighted in who you are, I am, and I want you. But sleep on it. After all this goes on, to sleep on it, lay down, right? We're going to take care of this in the morning. Picture this. I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, they have this intense conversation, life-changing conversation, go to sleep. Right? Now, this is good advice, though, that I actually learned this from my dad growing up. He said, whenever you make decisions, don't make the big ones at night. Avoid making big decisions at night. Significant stuff, not your basic stuff, big stuff. Why? Because at the end of the day, you're tired. No one's at their best at night. Sleep on it. Make your decision in the morning. And as I grew in my faith and learned more about God and his relationship with me, I started to think about it this way. If I sleep on it, I give God another 6 to 8 hours to talk to me. overnight, while you're sleeping. He does it all the time. Dreams, visions. Maybe you just feel differently about it in the morning. You might awake feeling really negative about that thing you decided to do, or really encouraged and positive and hopeful about that thing you've decided to do. Sleep on it. This is great advice to hold and make those big decisions in the morning. And so what happens in the morning? Let's keep reading. Verses 14 to the end of the chapter. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another. For he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak you're wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How'd things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." Try to picture how these two are feeling at this point. You think they got a good night's sleep? I picture these two people, after being told to wait, we're going to take care of this in the morning, right? That they probably lay on the floor just like staring at the ceiling all night long. Humility can be uncomfortable. Doing the right thing can be uncomfortable. And that's okay. I highly doubt these two got a great night's sleep. But that wasn't the point. They had their eye on the bigger picture of this, right? And the better thing to do was to wait until the morning, until this could be resolved in the light of day, and doing it the right way. Nothing inappropriate happened that night. Appearance matters. I'll be clear to you what I mean when I say that. I'm not saying we have to try to look better physically. What I'm saying is how we are perceived by others matters. Our appearance matters. All right? Notice these two had nothing to hide. They did nothing wrong. She lay at his feet. Nothing inappropriate happened. But he told her to hide anyway. Why? Because he didn't want anyone to think anything inappropriate about her or him. I think about the above reproach language of Philippians 2:15. Be above reproach. As Christians, we're told to be above reproach. The standard for that isn't just don't do anything wrong. The standard for that is don't even look like you're doing anything wrong. Above reproach. That's why she got up and out before she could be seen, because it was really important to Boaz and to Ruth to make sure they were perceived doing the right thing, honoring each other and honoring God in their relationship. But before she left, really early in the morning, he fills up her cloak. That same simila that she was wearing, right? He fills it up with barley. He didn't have to do that. She's been gleaning probably every day. They probably had enough, right? It's as if he fills it up as proof, I'm going to keep providing for you. And not just you, Ruth, to Naomi. Right? Note this, when you marry a spouse, you get the family. Amen? Absolutely. And so he's saying, if I take you in, I'm going to take Naomi in too. And remember how important this would be to Naomi. This is Naomi who's gone through famine. This is Naomi who said, I'm empty, I'm Mara, I'm bitter. And Boaz is saying, yeah, I love her too. And I will take care of Naomi too. So he fills her cloak before she goes on her way. And she brings that to Naomi. And Naomi says, wait. Wait. Actually says, wait, my daughter. You can imagine with all the anticipation, all the excitement about this, to then have her say, wait. The word is yashav, and it means sit, remain, dwell, hang tight. There's nothing you can do about this right now. Wait on him. Boaz is going to go take care of this. Humility waits. We need to do this with God. Wait. Sometimes it's not the right time, and we need to be comfortable waiting, knowing he's going to be out there taking care of this. And that's exactly what Boaz was doing. Right? And she even said this. She said, he is going to not rest until this is settled. In other words, Boaz, remember Boaz's name was Quick? Quick or strength? Boaz is going to be quick to resolve this for your peace. Remember how this chapter started, right? Naomi wants security, rest for Ruth. Now, at the end of the chapter, she's saying, I still want you to rest because he's going to be out working for your peace. She actually says he's not going to be shakat. He's not going to be quiet. He's not going to be undisturbed. He is going to be out there working his tail off to try to settle this for you. Isn't that how life works sometimes? That we have to work so someone else can get peace? It's a beautiful picture now of Boaz's humility, out working to settle this so she can be at rest. Sometimes we as Christians need to be working so someone else can rest and have that peace. And we know he's going to do it. Naomi knows he's going to do it, right? He says he will settle the matter today. The word for settle is kala, and it means complete, end it, finish it. He's going to take care of business. If he starts it, he's going to finish it. Humility completes. Humility does what it says it will do. And that's exactly what Boaz is out doing. And that's the cliffhanger we get right here at the end of chapter 3 until we come back next week and talk about chapter 4. But we are going to take communion. And as we've been talking about humility, there is no better way to end a sermon on humility than taking communion. Think about the humility of communion. Think about the humility of what Jesus Christ had to go through to commune with us. Right? Not just on the cross. Stripped, wrongly persecuted, beaten, carried his own cross, and then up on it. Not for him, but for you and for me. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for showing us humility. Not just talking to us about it, not just teaching it to us through your Son and through your word. Showing us humility. You've given us these incredible models of Ruth and Boaz and Naomi who didn't just talk humble, they lived humble. God, may we live humble and always remember the ultimate model of humility, which is what your Son did on that cross. So humiliating, and yet so what was necessary to make us right with you, just so you could love us and delight in us and have relationship with us forever. God, I pray that right now when we take this bread, we'll remember the body of your Son, Jesus Christ, voluntarily broken for us. We take this cup, that we remember the blood of your Son, voluntarily poured for us. May we be grateful and take in that humility and live it out. God, we love you, and it's in your Son's name and through your Spirit we pray. Amen.